Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about what I read for the month of December, and I'm so excited because it was my biggest month out of the whole year. I read 12 books that month, and I just hope this momentum keeps going. So right now, my story graph is not working, so I don't know how many pages I read and all that fun stuff, so I will put it up here somewhere once I'm going through and editing the video. But let's talk about all the books I read. I'm so excited. I was on a roll in December, which normally is the slowest month for me as far as reading goes because we have the holidays, we have New Year's, we have Christmas, and so I don't really get a lot of reading done like I would like to, but I don't know. For some reason, 2023 was a big win for me as far as December goes because I read the most I've ever read in my life. I read 12 books that month and I am so proud of myself. Some of them were romances, some of them were holiday romances, some of them were magical realism, some of them were fantasy. I read one thriller. So without further ado, let's begin and let's talk about these. I started off the month perfect with reading Ashley Poston's The 7-Year Slip. I absolutely love this book. I gave this book 5-star hands down. It was so good. It's got magical elements in it. It's got a romance. It's not your rom-com. It's more of a serious romance, but nonetheless, I gave it a 5. I loved it. I absolutely recommend it. It was such a good book, and I really love Ashley Poston's writing. I love the way that she writes her stories and her storylines, how sometimes she writes her characters, just everything about her writing I'm obsessed with, and it's not like it's something lyrical. It's not like it's something I can fully explain to you. Just know that her books are good. This is my second book I've read from her, and I think this is her second book that she's written. I'm not so certain, but I do highly recommend this one. This one follows Clementine West, and she has recently lost her aunt. Clementine has inherited her aunt's luxurious high-rise apartment, I believe, in Manhattan. It's kind of like an old Victorian style apartment. It's very beautiful inside, and her aunt has always told her that there's something special about this apartment. It's not just beautiful, but it also holds magic to it. So the story follows Clementine and the love interest. Oh my goodness, for the life of me, I cannot remember the main male character's name. I cannot remember him. I cannot remember his name at all. I think his name is Josh. Holy moly, guys. And it doesn't help that the back doesn't even say his name. It just says a man with a southern drawl. Okay, his name is Iwan. Josh, I don't know. His name is Iwan. So the story follows Clementine and Iwan. Clementine one day wakes up in her aunt's apartment like usual, but she wakes up 7 years in the past. So in her kitchen is this handsome man by the name of Iwan who has a southern drawl, who's just the sweetest man, and he's working to build a career as a chef. The story goes from there. It's magical. The apartment is magical. The romance is sweet. It's so good. It's sad at times because of Clementine dealing with her aunt's death, how all that ties in with her mourning and her having to live in her aunt's apartment. I highly recommend this book. It's a really, really good book. I had a good time reading it. Then I read Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. This is part of a series of standalones, and I think this is the first book in that series. I do own her second one. I think it's called Into the Weeds, but I gave this book a 4.5. It was such a good book. It's your typical heartfelt friends to lovers Christmas romance, and that's basically what it is. This story follows Stella and Luca, and they've been best friends for years and years. Stella owns a Christmas tree farm. However, her farm is not doing very well. She's afraid that she might have to call it quits. She enters in a contest with a famous influencer in order to win a huge cash prize to help her farm stay afloat. Now, Stella thought it was a good idea to basically lie on her application so that her Christmas tree farm seemed more magical and more romantic by saying that she owns this farm with her boyfriend that she has been dating for a long time. So this also has the fake dating trope, which I love. The only problem is that Stella doesn't have a successful Christmas tree farm. It's barely hanging on its last limb, and she doesn't have a boyfriend that she owns it with. So in order for her lie to go through and for the influencers to come and do basically a story on her magical Christmas tree farm, she asks her best friend Luca to pretend to be her boyfriend, at least just until all this is over so that she could possibly have a chance at winning the cash prize and helping her business stay afloat. It's friends to lovers, it's a fake dating trope, it's got just Christmassy vibes. You know, she owns a Christmas tree farm, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't give it a 5 because it was so obvious that both of them loved each other, and it was so frustrating that neither of them could just man up and tell each other and confess each other their love that they have for each other, which is why I gave it a 4.5 instead of a 5. But nonetheless, if you're going to read a Christmas story next year, I highly recommend that you read this one. And then I read One Puzzling Afternoon by Emily Critchley. Now, this was part of my Once Upon a Book Club. I think it was November or October's pick. I think it was November's pick. This is a mystery novel. It caught me by surprise because I didn't know that I was going to love it this much, just because the synopsis didn't really give me much and it didn't sound interesting. But man, I read this book in one sitting. I have never in my life have experienced reading a book this fast. I stayed up until 2:30 a.m. to finish it because it was that good. It was so juicy. And it's not like the story is very action-packed and a lot of things and a lot of plot twists and all that stuff. It's just that it was so juicy, interesting, compelling. I just couldn't stop reading it. The chapters were short. I was just intrigued. So we're following Eddie, and Eddie is an 80-year-old woman. She, 30 or 40 years ago, actually had a best friend who one day disappears. Her best friend Lucy disappears. And so the whole story is basically about Eddie trying to solve her friend's disappearance because the body was never found and it was just basically a cold case. The story takes place in the now and then, meaning how Eddie met her friend Lucy, how they became good friends, their relationship in the past, and to the now where Eddie is trying to figure out and solve her friend's disappearance. And it's just so good. Highly recommend. This was a no-brainer for me. It was a 5-star. I really just enjoyed it. I had such a good fun time reading this, and it was probably the best experience I've had ever reading a book where I've actually just did not want to put it down, kept thinking about it, and finished it in one sitting. Then I read The Unmaking of June by Adrienne Young. 5 stars. This book was so beautiful, so romantic. It's got magical realism in it. It's got romance. It's historical. It was just so good. It's got a mystery in it. I really don't know how to explain this book to you. I just know that it is, like, the romance is not in the forefront of this book at all because there's a mystery involved, but it's so romantic. And even though it's not the most compelling storyline, and at times it's kind of, you know, you kind of think to yourself, where's this going? It's just romantic. And I love Adrienne Young's writing. I love that her writing can be so captivating and so compelling and so lyrical and beautiful, and that's what this book was. It was beautiful, it was lyrical, it was compelling, it was romantic, and it was heartbreaking, and it was sad at times, and it was just everything. I loved it. I loved it so much. I'm just gonna read you the little blurb of it because that's basically all I want to talk to you about when it comes to this book. I'd rather you just go in it blind, not expecting much from it, but just getting wowed at the end. A woman risks everything to end her family's centuries-old curse, solve her mother's disappearance, and find love. That's it. Highly recommend. You should definitely read this one. Then I read Allie Hazelwood's Check and Mate. I gave this one a 2-star. I mean, I know that this book is solely based around chess players and chess, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't really care about the tournaments. I didn't care about anything that had to do with chess, honestly. I am interested in the game. I just didn't care to read so much about it. It was so chess heavy that I just didn't really enjoy it. This is also considered a YA. There's a few topics in here that are very questionable when it comes to YA. It doesn't sound like a YA. I did not like the main character. I thought she was very annoying and potty mouth, and I just didn't like her actions sometimes. I really didn't enjoy it at all. This book took me, I think, 2 weeks to finish, and even though it's such a short book, it was like pulling teeth finishing it, and I should have just DNF'd it. But I didn't. I stuck through it for what? I mean, it wasn't the greatest thing I've ever read. Definitely disappointing since I really like Allie Hazelwood's writing and her adult romances, but this one just did not hit the spot. This story follows Mallory, and something happened in her past where she is no longer playing chess. She doesn't want to be involved with chess at all because it brings back memories, until one day she decides to do one last charity tournament. After that, she gets propositioned, something she can't refuse, to be part of a chess club, basically go win the champions. In there, she meets Nolan, which becomes her enemy because he is one of the top chess players of the world. She just doesn't get along with him. It's their romance, it's their story. The story goes from there, and I just didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it at all. I did appreciate the parts where, even though this is set to be a YA and it didn't feel like it, you really come to understand and feel for the main character, for what she's going through. The fact that she's basically the breadwinner of the house and she has to help things stay afloat, and she has to keep the lights on and feed her mom who can't go to work and feed her two little sisters. So there is a lot of moments in there where you kind of feel for the character and what she's struggling through and what she's going through and what makes her feel like she's more of a matured character. But then when she opens her mouth and just starts spitting out cuss words, just has like this annoying attitude, it's kind of hard to root for that one person. So I don't recommend this book. You're not missing out if you don't read it, and I gave this one a 2. Then I read Through the Snow Globe by Annie Raines, and I believe I gave this one a 4.5. This was such an emotional, sad Christmas romance. That's all I'm really gonna say about it. Something happens in the character's life where she gets a chance to relive that day until she gets it right, basically. And that's all I'm gonna say. And this book was just, oh, it was so sad. It had a good ending, I will say that, but it was just so sad. It was just one of those really emotional Christmas stories that just grabs at your heart and pulls and just makes you sob. But I do recommend it. It's a really good book. It has meaning and lessons to be learned. I just enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. Then I was craving a thriller because during this time of the year, if I do read a lot of Christmas books and romances, I want to change it up a notch, cleanse my palate a little bit, and read a thriller. Nothing's better than a thriller set in the wintry, isolated area, because that's December. You know, December is cold and wintry. So I ended up picking up One by One by Ruth Ware. And this one, I think I gave a 3. I enjoyed the audiobook of this. The narrators were great with their thick accents, but it was very predictable. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't that great either. I predicted who the person was, and this is kind of like one of those whodunit mystery thrillers. It's following a group of people who work in this tech company. The co-owner and the co-founder rent out this secluded retreat so they can all bond together and they can have meetings together. One by one, they start getting killed off. So that's basically what the story is about. It does have really nice atmosphere of them being secluded in this very nice, prestigious retreat resort type of thing. And then there is a storm. There's a snowstorm that happens and they get trapped in the resort. So it's got really good atmospheric vibes. But again, it's very predictable and it wasn't that thrilling. I kind of guessed who it was at the very beginning. Then I read The Mistletoe Motive by Chloe Lees. This is a cute little short novella about enemies to lovers. They are both co-managing this bookstore, and that's basically it. I don't really want to say a lot. I just know that they despise each other and they're kind of competing to be the last manager standing in this bookstore because it's not doing so great. They have competition across the street who is basically stealing the bookstore's business. And so the owners basically let them know that things keep going this way, they might not be able to have the bookstore stay afloat. So obviously they are competing for this one spot in the bookstore, and the story goes from there. This book has the greatest banter that I have ever read between two characters when it comes to your classic enemies to lovers trope, and I loved it. The girl is very quirky, very sunshine. She loves holiday. She's always in the holiday spirit. She's always drinking her peppermint hot cocoa on her way to work. The Christmassy vibes in this book are phenomenal, and also the fact that it takes place in a bookstore, I am sold. And then the main male character, which his name is Jonathan Frost. He's a grumpy person. He is very uptight. He likes things neatly coordinated, and he's got to stick up his butt. So that's why they make the perfect lovers. That's all I'm going to say. I highly recommend it. It's a short, sweet book. If you're listening to the audiobook of this, the narrator does sound older than what the main character is in the book, which is one of the main things that annoyed me. I just sucked it up because I didn't really have time to read it all the way. I just listened to the audiobook. The ending of this book, you get one chapter with Jonathan's point of view, and it was phenomenal. Okay, it was so good. So good that we were lucky enough to have a male narrator narrate his part of the book. And the last couple sentences of the book were just so good. I highly recommend it. I gave this one a 5-star. It was a good time. Then I read A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. This was a very emotional, hard at times to read type of a romance book. And you know what? Some people didn't enjoy this one, but I gave this one a 4.5. I enjoyed it. It is slow paced, but I feel like with Josie Silver, her books tend to be more on the emotional romance roller coaster than they do tend to be any kind of rom-com. So if you're not wanting a serious romance with characters that actually have problems and some drama happens, then this probably is not for you. But if you want to just be feeling the emotions and just connect with the characters on a different emotional level, then I highly recommend this one. All I'm gonna say is that she used to be a chef. Something happens in her old life that she has to get up and leave and move to New York. She stumbles upon a recipe that literally changes her life, and that's it. That's all I'm going to say about this book. I highly recommend it. If you want to cry, if you want to feel for the characters, if you want an emotional roller coaster, read this book. Then I read Once Upon a Book Club's 12 Days of Book Clubmas, volume, I don't know, 5 or something. I don't know how to read Roman numerals. Don't judge me, okay? This is my second year participating in this, where they provide a huge box full of 12 days of gifts along with 12 short stories. I gave this a 4 because they're 12 short stories, and I think for this year the theme was very bookish related. There was book sleeves in some stories, there were bookstores, there was a writer. I just really enjoyed most of the short stories. My only complaint is that some of the stories were way too long. Like, they didn't have to be this long. Like, I'm talking 30 plus pages for one short story, and when I'm reading a short story, I don't want it to be that long. But other than that, I thought this year's edition was very magical, and I love the fact it was very heavy on bookish themes. So I recommend you getting their box next year. I think it was a fun time. You get to read a story a day and open a gift correlating to that story, and it was just so fun. Then I read one of the most life-changing books, like, of all time, aside from ACOTAR, okay? I read The Scarlet Alchemist by Kylie Lee Baker. This was so good. Hands down, a 5-star. It was so captivating. It was so interesting. It had a little bit of a romance in there. The romance was not at the forefront of it, but it was so good and so compelling. Very action-packed. Kept me on my toes, and I just couldn't stop reading it. And this is a YA historical fantasy. There is some elements of romance in there, but it's not really heavy on the romance. It follows Zilang Fan, who dreams of studying and being a royal alchemist, where she gets to hang in the palace and be their royal alchemist. Now, in the story, there is alchemy. You are allowed to practice it. However, the kind that she practices is under the table, it's illegal, and she only does it because, you know, she's trying to stay afloat and help her family, her aunt, her uncle, who own a little clay shop, I believe it is, and her 2 cousins. So in order for them to make ends meet, because the shop is not doing very well and not producing so much money, she practices illegal alchemy by resurrecting people. And the most interesting part is that not everybody can resurrect the dead. Not everybody could do it. She is one of the very few people out there who has been able to do it somewhat successfully, is all I'm going to say. It's just so interesting. I've never been so interested in a topic ever in my life than alchemy. Like, it's just the whole story and aspect of it is just, to me, mind-blowing. There is Asian literature in here, and this is what they believed back in old times. Like, there's also Mandarin words in here, so I did read this along with the audiobook, and the person that narrated this book had the most soothing, beautiful, relaxed voice ever. I had such a great time reading this book. Also, there's an element in here where the royal palace and those of the rich, because there's the south where she lives, which is pure poverty, very poor people, and then there is the rich, I think, that live in the north, and the well-off. What is so interesting is that in order for these rich people to live forever, they actually physically eat gold. That is so interesting to me, and it's just so, like, you know, kind of sets the table for a lot of discussion. It's just so interesting. The way that the royal empress is described and depicted in this story is just so interesting because she's so cruel, she's so selfish, and she's just so bad. And there was actually a person back in their Asian literature where she did do this. She did practice in some really bad things just to be the crowned empress. It's interesting. It's interesting to read about these things things. So anyways, back to what I was saying about this book. So it follows Ilan Fan. She wants to be a world alchemist, and in order to do that, she has to go through a series of exams to pass the test to be honored to be one. She's practicing illegal alchemy in the meantime just to try to help her family stay afloat. And then one day everything changes because the crown prince propositions her. She really can't refuse this proposition, so she decides to help him. The story goes from there. I highly recommend it. It was a 5-star. I can't wait for the next book. The way it ended was really good. I was content with the ending. I just can't wait to see what the author does with the second book in the series. Lastly, but not least, I read To Kill a Shadow by Catherine Quinn, and this book is a fantasy romance. It's almost like an enemies to lover, forbidden romance type of thing. It's got very creepy vibes. It's got the very spooky elements in there. There's like zombie looking monsters in here. It is so good. This book is considered a fantasy romance horror because of the elements and the monsters that it has in it, but it's really, really good. Described as The Mist with a touch of Evil Dead. It's a fantasy horror about a kingdom left to darkness. I really like the tension that the main character Kiara and the Hand of Death, which is Jude, have in this book. It's about a cursed kingdom. It follows the main character Kiara and Jude, who is known to be the captain of the guards, and he is called the Hand of Death because he's kind of like an assassin. Their kingdom is about to fall because there's a curse cursing the lands. There is no more sunlight. There's only darkness, and in these woods monsters lurk, and so they team up together to kind of find the 3 keys that they need in order for this curse to be lifted. And it's their romance. There's so much tension. There's really great banter in here, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the storyline. I didn't give it a 5. I think I gave it a 4 or 4.5 because it just wasn't hitting and didn't make me feel like a 5-star read. But nonetheless, it's a really great book. I highly recommend it if you're looking for something not only fantasy romance, but there's some horror elements in there. It's got the creepy vibes. This would be a really good book to read in the fall season. I really enjoyed it. It's also very action-packed, and I also did listen to this on audio, and the nice part about this is that you get the main female and the main male's point of view. So you get dual point of views, which is really nice because you don't really see that a lot in a lot of fantasies. So it's nice that you could kind of get into Jude, which is the main character's head, and it's also a male narrator as well. So highly recommended. It's very, very interesting. You'll be glued onto the pages for sure. So there you have it. Those are the 12 books that I read for the month of December. I'm hoping that I can continue this momentum for January because I've just been in a really great reading mood and I don't want to stop. So that's it. That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and I will catch you on my next one. Bye!